let's talk about recommendations for implementing evidence-based interventions. So, what are the evidence-based intervention practices that should be incorporated into reading interventions for students in grades 4 through 9? A useful resource to answer this question is the What Works Clearinghouse Practice Guide, titled Providing Reading Interventions to Students in Grades 4 through 9. This guide synthesizes recent research and practical recommendations from an expert panel. The recommendations are designed to help teachers meet the needs of their students with reading difficulties and disabilities, including those with characteristics of dyslexia, while also addressing the requirements of the Every Student Succeeds Act, or ESSA, and the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, or IDEA. There are 4 general recommendations from this practice guide about providing reading interventions to students in grades 4 through 9, each of which corresponds to an ESSA level of evidence as either strong, moderate, or minimal. The first 3 recommendations have strong evidence. These include build students' decoding skills so they can read complex, multisyllabic words, provide purposeful fluency-building activities to help students read effortlessly, and routinely use a set of comprehension-building practices to help students make sense of text. The 4th recommendation has moderate evidence. Provide students with opportunities to practice making sense of stretch text, which is also referred to as challenging text, that will expose them to complex ideas and information. In this video, I will focus mostly on recommendations 1 and 2, as these relate most closely to the primary needs of students with the characteristics of dyslexia. And I will share examples of what these recommendations look like in practice. However, it is important to note that these students may also need additional intervention focused on comprehension to meet their needs. The first recommendation is to build students' decoding skills so they can read complex words. This recommendation has strong evidence. The What Works Clearinghouse Practice Guide provides these suggested ways to carry out the recommendation. Number 1, identify students' word reading skills. Number 2, use a multisyllabic word reading routine. Number 3, embed spelling. And number 4, provide practice activities to promote accuracy and automaticity. In what follows, I'll share what these look like in practice. The first suggested way to carry out this recommendation is to identify students' word reading skills, if you haven't already done so as part of the identification process. The practice guide recommends administering a word list measure, such as the Core Phonics Survey, and possibly an oral reading fluency measure, such as the Dibbles 8th edition Oral Reading Fluency, also called ORF. Then, you'll want to score the assessments and identify patterns of errors through an error analysis. You are essentially trying to determine what is the rate at which students are reading, which is their automaticity, their accuracy, and any patterns of error. For example, do students consistently have difficulty with common foundational skills, such as short or long vowels spelled with single letters, vowel teams such as EA or AI, consonant digraphs and trigraphs such as TCH or DGE, or affixes, which include prefixes like re in replay, or suffixes like shun in action. Once you've identified students' word reading skills, you're ready to teach or review these common foundational skills the students need to develop. Make sure instruction is guided by the structured literacy principles by using explicit instruction and ensuring that students have plenty of opportunities to practice with feedback. The second suggestion to carry out this recommendation is to use a multisyllabic word reading routine by explicitly teaching a routine they can use to decode multisyllabic words. This means that the teacher needs to model the routine while thinking aloud, guide students through application of the routine, and provide ample opportunities for practice and feedback. Here is an example of a multisyllabic word reading routine students can learn to use. Number 1, look for prefixes and suffixes. Circle them. Number 2, underline the remaining vowels. Number 3, loop under each word part as you say it. Number 4, say the whole word by blending the parts together, making it into a word you recognize. Over time, as students practice using this routine, they can internalize it and be able to decode multisyllabic words while reading. The third suggestion to carry out this recommendation is to embed spelling instruction in the reading intervention lessons. This is important because spelling and reading are highly connected, and improved spelling can lead to better reading outcomes. Teachers should provide ample opportunities for students to practice spelling with feedback in intervention lessons. For example, students can practice spelling word parts from multisyllabic words in isolation. Have students read the multisyllabic word, then say the parts, and then spell the parts. Provide corrective feedback as needed, and have students rewrite the correctly spelled word or word part. Some students may also need explicit instruction on spelling rules, such as rules for adding suffixes to base words. The final suggestion to carry out this recommendation is to provide practice activities to promote accuracy and automaticity. This should involve a wide array of activities that allows students to practice reading multisyllabic words accurately and with increasing automaticity. This is important because students need multiple exposures to words they're learning to read. These activities could be incorporated into various parts of the lesson. For example, a lesson opening or closing that involves cumulative review of previously learned content. These opportunities should involve practice reading word lists, sentences, and passages with feedback from a teacher or peer. Here are 3 examples of activities for helping students become accurate and automatic word readers. Word building, untimed and timed word list reading, and sentence and passage text reading. The first activity is word building, in which students can add prefixes and suffixes to base words or roots, and then practice reading the words they created. Students can also read lists of words or word parts, like prefixes and suffixes, in timed and untimed conditions. In this example, I might have students read the list first to a partner, untimed, and then with me, timed. Alternatively, students could read a list twice aloud, timed, and then they can try to beat their time. Another activity to promote accuracy and automaticity is text reading. Students can read sentences and passages with the target word or words with similar patterns. For each of these activities, there are different options for reading that provide different levels of scaffolding and support. For example, before reading a passage, a teacher might identify the more complicated multisyllabic words and have students use their multisyllabic word reading routine to decode. Then, the teacher might have students chorally read the list of words together as a group, before having them read the words individually or with a partner. Students who are reading word lists may whisper read them, read to a partner, and then read to the teacher. In summary, it is important for students to read words multiple times with feedback to develop accuracy and automaticity. The second recommendation from the What Works Clearinghouse Practice Guide is to provide purposeful fluency building activities to help students read effortlessly. This recommendation also has strong evidence. Reading text fluently is especially important for older students because it allows them to focus on understanding what they're reading. Suggested steps for carrying out this recommendation include repeated readings with a purpose, reading with prosody, and reading a wide range of texts. In what follows, I'll share what these look like in practice. Let's begin with repeated readings with a purpose. In interventions for younger students, timed repeated readings are often effective for improving oral reading fluency. For older students receiving reading interventions, teachers should provide a purpose for each repeated reading. It is recommended to have students reread the same passage 3 to 4 times, with a different purpose each time. Some examples for different purposes include having students focus on pace and expression, answering questions, identifying unknown words, or reflecting on what was learned in the text. This purpose can vary based on student needs. For example, students who are working on multisyllabic word reading in intervention could be asked to identify multisyllabic words in the text as a purpose for reading. Additionally, when incorporating text reading into a reading intervention in grades 4 through 12, teachers should use context-rich passages. In other words, these passages should align with content that is being taught in students' other classes, such as science, social studies, English language arts, and mathematics. For example, if students are learning about the Second World War in social studies, the teacher could select a text about this topic for repeated reading practice in order to build fluency. Let's look at an example of providing a purpose that connects to multisyllabic word reading. In this example, the teacher's purpose is to have students read multisyllabic words with accuracy. Before reading, the teacher would have students skim the passage and underline or circle words they can't read or don't understand. The teacher might say something like, "Today, we're going to read a text about blank." The first time we read this text, we're going to focus on reading the words correctly. Before we read, please skim the passage and underline any big words that you don't recognize. The teacher can then prompt students to use their multisyllabic word reading strategy to pronounce the words before reading. If needed, the teacher can provide the pronunciation for the student. After students have identified words, the teacher might write them on the board and say, "Let's use our multisyllabic word reading strategy to break this word into its parts." Then, the teacher can have the students apply the strategy and read the words to their partner. It is especially helpful to provide the pronunciation of irregular words and proper nouns that cannot be easily decoded. An example for some words the teacher might provide the pronunciation of are words like Galileo, Amelia Earhart, or pneumonia. The teacher might say, "Some of these words are a bit trickier. Listen to me read this word. Galileo." What word? The students then chorally respond, "Galileo." The teacher says, "Yes, Galileo was a scientist, and we're going to learn about some important discoveries Galileo made in our text today." Then, the teacher would have the students read the passage aloud, using a method such as partner reading, where students take turns reading sections of text. If students have difficulty with word reading accuracy, the teacher would prompt the student or train the partners to use prompts such as, "Try that word again. Use your multisyllabic word reading strategy." Or just say, "What could you try?" Using prompts such as "What could you try?" helps older students develop independence with using strategies so that they can figure out when and where to apply different strategies while reading. Lastly, the teacher or partner would prompt the student to read the word and reread the sentence with the word again. For example, after the student successfully decodes the word, the teacher might say, "Say the word again." The student says the word, and then the teacher says, "Reread the sentence with that word." Then the student rereads the sentence. Here is another example of having students engage in repeated reading with a purpose. In this example, the teacher combines two purposes into one, answering questions and identifying the main idea. The teacher might say, "We're going to read this text several times, and each time we're going to have a different purpose. First, I want you to read the text to yourself. Then, turn to your partner and tell them what the passage is about. Remember to include who or what the passage is about and the most important information about the passage." The teacher then monitors and provides feedback as students read and generate main ideas. The teacher then provides a list of questions about the text and says, now we're going to read the passage again. I want partner A to read the first 2 paragraphs aloud while partner B monitors. Then answer questions 1 to 2 together. Then partner B will read paragraphs 3 and 4 aloud while partner A monitors. Answer questions 3 and 4 together. The teacher then monitors and provides feedback as students read and answer questions. The next suggested step for carrying out recommendation number 2 advises teachers to focus some instructional time on having students read with prosody. Prosody refers to reading with expression, appropriate pitch and tempo, and pauses at the right places. Pauses, tempo, and emphasis placed on different words can help readers understand what they're reading. When introducing students to prosody, a teacher can read a paragraph twice, once with expression and once without, and then discuss the 2 readings with students. This discussion should emphasize which version was easier to comprehend or understand and why. The teacher might say, "Listen to me read this paragraph twice. Listen for the differences in my reading." Tim had been staring at his science textbook for hours. He didn't know how to start studying for his big test on Friday. Or, Tim had been staring at his science textbook for hours. He didn't know how to start studying for his big test on Friday. After reading, the teacher might say, "Turn to your partner and talk about the differences in the 2 readings. Which one was easier to understand?" The teacher monitors student responses and emphasizes that reading with prosody helps the reader better understand the text. Other activities to support prosody include teaching students to recognize punctuation, have students listen to audio and then repeat, and show students where to pause. Let's talk about these more. When teaching students to recognize punctuation, we explicitly show them how to pause at commas, stop at periods, and change tone to show emotions, such as using an excited voice to read sentences with an exclamation point. Next, students can listen to an audio or video clip of text and then read the text themselves and repeat the expressions they heard in the clip. Instead of a recorded audio, a teacher can also read 1 to 2 sentences with prosody and have students repeat. This is a practice known as echo reading. Finally, teachers can show students where to pause by marking phrases with slashes. Let's look at an example of how to break up a text with slashes in order to teach prosody. Before reading, the teacher marks the text with slashes at the phrases, commas, and periods. Then the teacher explains, "Let's read this passage. When you see a slash, you're going to briefly pause. 1 slash is a shorter pause, and 2 slashes have a longer pause. Listen to me do it first." Tim had been staring at his science textbook for hours. He didn't know how to start studying for his big test on Friday. Then the teacher says, "Your turn. Read this text while pausing at the slashes." The teacher then monitors and provides feedback as needed. The final suggested step for carrying out recommendation number 2 is to provide opportunities for students to read a wide range of texts with different sentence structures and syntax when focusing on fluency and comprehension. When selecting text, teachers should consider aligning them with students' interests or grade level topics. For example, if students are learning about cells in biology or life science, the reading intervention teacher could use texts on the topic of cells to engage students. However, the students shouldn't only read texts about cells. They should read texts from different genres, such as fiction, biographies, mysteries, historical fiction, nonfiction, or informational text. This ensures that students are exposed to different sentence structures and syntax. We don't want students reading only well-controlled text or text that lacks complexity, because this won't prepare them for the reading demands across their content area classes. Now that we have explored implementation of Recommendations 1 and 2 from the What Works Clearinghouse guide about providing reading interventions to students in grades 4 to 9, let's talk a little about Recommendations 3 and 4. Recommendation 3 is to routinely use comprehension building practices to help students make sense of text. Recommendation 4 is to provide students with opportunities to comprehend more challenging text. As a reminder, some students with the characteristics of dyslexia may also need interventions that include the practices in Recommendations 3 and 4. Let's talk a little more about these recommendations. Recommendation 3 is to routinely use a set of comprehension building practices to help students make sense of the text. This involves practices such as building students' knowledge of words and the world, providing students with opportunities to ask and answer text-based questions, teaching a main idea routine, and teaching students to monitor their comprehension. To build students' knowledge of words and the world, teachers need to explicitly teach the meaning of a few essential words that are crucial for students to be able to comprehend a passage. This is done with a student-friendly definition, an example and non-example, or visual representation. This can also be accomplished through teaching students strategies to analyze word parts, such as prefixes, suffixes, and roots, and use those to figure out what a word means in context. In order to build student knowledge about the world, teachers can have students view or listen to a short 2 to 4 minute video clip, podcast, or a lecture with visuals related to the reading. Teachers could also have students read a brief, easier to read article or paragraph related to the topic to build knowledge. The next powerful comprehension building practice is to teach students to answer different types of questions and to teach students to ask and answer their own questions from a text. There are 3 common types of questions we can teach students: right there questions, think and search questions, and author and me questions. For right there questions, the answer is right there in the text. These questions usually include words from the text. A think and search question requires students to use information from different parts of the text. Last, an author and me question requires students to use information from the text and previously learned information in order to answer the question. The third comprehension building practice is for teachers to teach students a main idea routine, such as get the gist. Many teachers tell students to find the main idea. However, students with reading difficulties and disabilities may not know how to find the main idea. Strategies such as get the gist provide a set of steps that can be explicitly taught to students to show them how to find the main idea in a text. With the get the gist routine, students are taught to identify who or what the paragraph is about, and then identify the most important information about the who or what. They then put these ideas together to write a gist or main idea sentence that incorporates the who or what and the most important information about the who or what. The last powerful comprehension building practice is comprehension monitoring. Students with reading difficulties and disabilities may get accustomed to text just not making sense when they're reading it. They need to be explicitly taught how to monitor their comprehension to determine when something doesn't make sense and how to apply strategies to better understand what was read. There are several strategies teachers can use to help students monitor their own comprehension, including asking students to read sentences and determine if they make sense, stopping frequently while reading to ask questions, to answer or reflect on what was just read, and providing opportunities for students to reflect more generally on a lesson or reading. It is important to remember that these 4 comprehension practices I just shared are not done in isolation. In fact, many can be combined into one lesson to support student needs. For example, before teaching a passage about cells, the teacher might start by showing a brief 3-minute video clip about cells. Then, the teacher might explicitly teach the meaning of 2 new words that are essential for understanding the passage, such as convert and transport. During reading, the teacher might have students ask and answer different types of questions in partners, small groups, or as a whole class. At the end, the teacher could have students monitor their comprehension by having them complete an exit ticket in which they reflect on what they learned by answering the following prompt. Today I learned. This example I just walked through shows how these comprehension building practices can be combined to support students working strategically to comprehend texts. Now, let's talk about recommendation number 4, which is to provide students with opportunities to comprehend more challenging texts. The goal of this recommendation is to provide students with practice making sense of stretched text or challenging text that will expose them to complex ideas and information. This involves supporting students as they read more complex texts that are connected to topics in their content area classes. Stretched texts provide students with opportunities to read challenging text that is at or slightly above the level they could read without teacher support. First, a teacher should select a text that is engaging for students. This could be related to a topic they're learning about, accomplishments of important figures, or an important issue, such as justice or fairness. These texts could be included in existing curricular materials or from popular news sites. Then, the teacher previews the text and determines appropriate stopping points and essential vocabulary words to teach. Teachers should select frequent points to stop and discuss to ensure students are comprehending the text. They might stop when the text has particularly difficult syntax or when a comparison is being made. During this process, they can also create a list of difficult multisyllabic words, essential vocabulary words, or proper nouns to pre-teach to students. These can be taught using the aforementioned strategies in this video. During reading, the teacher has students read the text as a group and provides additional scaffolds as necessary. Students may read the text in partners, or the teacher may choose to read the text aloud. The teacher stops at the predetermined points and provides additional instruction, such as clarifying the meaning of phrases or complex syntax. In this video, we learned that when planning interventions for students in grades 4 through 9, you can consider these 4 general recommendations from the What Works Clearinghouse practice guide. Number 1, build students' decoding skills so they can read complex multisyllabic words. Number 2, provide purposeful fluency-building activities to help students read effortlessly. Number 3, routinely use a set of comprehension-building practices. And number 4, provide students with opportunities to practice making sense of complex